Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Miss Pass Podcast. I'm Alex Goff. We're on FloRugby. Adam Armstrong is not with us. Michael Kramer, you're here. You made it through the snow and you got felled by some contagion and everything, but you're alive and here, so I'm happy.
Yeah, I made it back down to some nice warm weather down here in Texas.
You get snowed in?
Not snowed in. I mean, up there you don't really get snowed in, right? You know, maybe elsewhere in the country. Yeah. But we know how to deal with it up there.
Right, you just float on top. It's good, you just snowshoes and everything. We're pretty happy to have what was just the two of us. We do have a third person here on the show. It's kind of like a better looking, more successful fullback version of Adam Armstrong, and that will be Cardiff Blues and USA captain Blaine Scully is on the show with us. So Blaine, really happy to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Well, Blaine, you know, you've got a long history with American rugby, played at Cal, All-American there. You were at Jesuit High School, which is a hotbed of rugby, and you didn't play rugby there. I think it was water polo, right? You ever get nagged by some of the rugby guys at Jesuit to go play rugby?
Yeah, no, I had a lot of friends who played rugby. So I played water polo, basketball, and swimming. And yeah, as you mentioned, funny enough, I didn't play rugby, but it ended up being the sport I was supposed to play all along. So I picked that up at UCLA from a buddy who I went to Jesuit with, and so he kind of introduced the game to me, and been in love with it ever since.
Picked it up at UCLA, transferred to Cal, ended up captaining Cal, and now you're with the Cardiff Blues. So tell me a little bit about that. How's that been? You signed a contract extension in the fall, so they've got to be happy with you, and you've got to be happy with them.
Yeah, so it's my 5th season here over in the UK. It seems like it's flown by. So I originally, back in 2013, came on a 2-week trial at Leicester. 2 weeks turned into 4 weeks, which turned into a couple years, which turned into a deal at Cardiff, which now I've been here for my 3rd season now, and signed an extension through 2020. And nice. It's a very cool rugby city. I've been really fortunate in my career to be at kind of 2 premier clubs with a lot of history, a lot of tradition, in Leicester and in Cardiff. Wales is a as you know, a very intense rugby culture. They love it here. It's very passionate, and it's a pretty cool day job.
It is very nice, and Leicester's a massive hotbed of rugby too. They loved you there. You made a couple of sort of some instant impressions as a player who, I mean, you put everything out there when you got your chance. I think you understand what it's like to be an American professional. Is that you get that slim chance. You've got to take it with both hands and make an impression, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely, and because the opportunities are too few and far between, and as you mentioned, the opportunities can be pretty limited. So, and I think you build that way day in and day out in the training environment. Now you carry yourself as a professional and kind of earn that respect and credibility. And it's not a knock on anyone, but the reality is you're just not seen as coming from a rugby playing culture, and that's just a perception. And the reality is when I first got my contract, I remember Coach Bill telling me just have to be twice as good. So, that's kind of been my motto, and the way I've carried myself throughout my career is just to try to do the best I can with the opportunities that I'm given, and leave no stone unturned, and leave nothing to chance, and make sure I'm putting in everything every day and getting the most out of it.
One of the things about that for fans in the United States is they'll check, how are these Americans doing overseas? We'll check the lineups, we'll check the game reports, and sometimes we don't see a guy, and sometimes and this has happened with you. It happened with a lot of guys, whereas he's not in the game day 23, and he's healthy. Take us a little bit behind that kind of thing. When do you find out, say, that you're playing? What are some of the things that make it difficult to get in the starting lineup, even if you're an Eagle?
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, I think so. First of all, just from a structural point of view, the season is a bit of a beast in that it's a 10-month season, and you throw in international rugby, you can go from thing to thing. So there's a lot of demands on players at the high end of the game now. And that being said, you have responsibilities to your country and your club, and obviously you want to perform and do everything you can to help those teams and compete in every match you can. But the realities are that you're just not able to, whether that's through injuries. There needs to be some sort of management, squad rotation, because it is a campaign, both collectively and individually. So there is some management stuff, and always a healthy club and healthy teams have competition. So there's a lot of good players who are competing for same spots, and there's actually a limited amount of foreign spots on a field as well, depending on what competition you're in. That changes. So you're actually only limited to a couple of spots for anybody outside of English qualified or Welsh qualified or Irish qualified, or it's not quite as strict in France, although they're taking steps to change that. So that league will go through an adjustment period probably in the next season or two. So there's a whole lot of factors, but at the end of the day, as you said, it's about putting yourself in a position to be competing for a spot week in and week out, and then taking your opportunity when you get it.
Michael, you're on social media a lot with the fans. Do you think everybody sort of understands that? The idea that, they didn't make the starting lineup. It wasn't that they're not good enough, but there are other factors involved.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh. Go ahead, Brian.
And just like,
Go ahead,
sorry,
Michael. You
like
can talk. We'll let Michael talk, and then we'll let Blaine talk.
Yeah, so I think they understand. Obviously they'd like to see their favorite player play every week, right? That's what we want to see, but you can't do it. I mean, Blaine was just talking. It's a campaign. You got I don't even know how many weeks, but I mean, you got to save your body. You got to save your mind as well. Rotating players and getting a little bit of rest here and there. I mean, it's understandable.
What about that, Blaine, saving your mind? What do you do outside of rugby?
I found balance is pretty important. So I think, especially with the nature of the season, like we just kind of spoke about, having those little outlets where you're able to find some reprieve from the pressure of performance, because it's a real thing, and being at your best, obviously, every weekend, is a challenge to manage over a 10-month season. And so for me, luckily, my wife is over here with me now, and she wasn't with me for the first couple of seasons, so that's probably helped my balance a lot. Having a partner to kind of share this experience with, which has been amazing, and really fortunate to have her here. So we do all sorts of little excursions and trips to some of the cool little places in the UK, and on a non-training day after I've done my regen and all that kind of stuff. But little moments where you just kind of get to take a deep breath and whether it's read a book. I just started writing an article for the Cardiff Life magazine, which has been interesting, and then obviously been a little bit busy with the Players Association stuff, helping try to drive that as well, and then one or two other projects that I find interesting, and try to keep myself as balanced and well-rounded as I can while making tackles for a living.
That's while making tackles for a living. Did see the article you wrote. I love that comment you made about seeing real castles, which probably speaks to you making some excursions around there. And Wales is about as good a place as you could ever find for seeing some pretty impressive castles from 1,000 years ago. So that's pretty nice. It's got to be a pretty nice place to be. Talk about the pressure of performance, though. We do have the America's Rugby Championship coming up. You're going to be captaining the side, and there's a lot of talk about overseas professionals being available. Not all of them are available. Some get hurt. Some are, it just seems like they're looking at, maybe you can speak to it more clearly, but they look at their situation and say, I need to establish myself here in the club. What is the conversation like for you with the Cardiff Blues? Will you be available for the entire ARC, or are you going to do just a couple of games and go back? How's it going to work?
Yeah, so I think it's a very individual thing. It kind of comes down to the athlete and the club they're at, and what the needs are at the club at the time. And been pretty fortunate to have support on both ends of of that exchange with club and country, because it can be pretty delicate in the sense that obviously we want our best players to be available at all times for the national team, but we also want them in professional environments, competing and at a high level and getting good quality training day in and day out. It's good. It's a good thing for the national team in the long term. So the more people we have in those environments, whether they're at home or abroad, is really important to us. But kind of taking all the things collectively into kind of a larger package, and then have that inform the decisions that individual athletes have to make and clubs have to make, and then national team has to make. And hopefully, I think the challenge is and is just to find that middle ground and compromise really on what the needs are in that individual case. A club might be strapped for injuries and really need a player at a certain point. The club might be stretched from international availability, and their players leaving for England or Ireland or Wales or Scotland or wherever they are. And that being said, there's also needs for the national team, because one of the fundamental reason why most of us play professional rugby is to play for the national team. My goal and my aspirations is always to throw on the red, white, and blue and represent to the best I can. So obviously every opportunity I have to do that is really important to me. So just trying to find the right balance between all the parties and come to a workable agreement to do the best we can in a difficult situation.
Yeah, it's always difficult. Do you know, are you going to be available for all 5 games? Or is that still?
I'll be available for the first 2 matches.
All right, and that's the balance you have to strike, especially with, it's funny because it's the ARC is the Six Nations window when players should be available, but of course, that's when players who are playing for the Six Nations countries are away. So then other players are needed. So it's that balancing act. You've played in the Premiership. You've played in Pro 14. Which is tougher?
Ooh, it's a tough question.
Yeah,
I mean, I think they're slightly different competitions. It's really interesting. You can see kind of the unique nature of each individual competition. So you look at the French, when we play them in Europe, it's incredible how big they are as teams. They're by far the biggest as far as man size in the world. They're all giants. And it's a very physical, attritional type of league. Premiership, set piece oriented, very tactical based, and I think in the Pro 14, it's a little bit not quite as big as far as stature wise as you'd find in some of the Premiership teams, but the ball and play time is usually very high, and there's a lot of rugby played in the Pro 14, and it's been a really cool experience in the sense that we travel a lot more in the Pro 14 because we compete across Scotland and Ireland and Italy, and we'll go to South Africa in April.
Nice.
So it's really been cool to kind of be introduced, and because you have these unique flavors in the competition, which the Premiership is obviously all English, and I think it's an awesome league. I loved playing in the Premiership. I think it is a very, very, very good league, and love the challenges that are presented, and in a different way than in the Pro 14. They're really, it's been a really cool experience overall.
Very nice. And you mentioned France, and looking to showcase the French rugby a little bit on FloRugby, and as you said, the athletes are huge. You've got players coming from all over the world, kind of globalizing the game again. I mean, it's always been a global game, but you get a lot of that flavor in France, don't you? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, and it's amazing in that league because it's fluid. Where usually you get consistency in the Premiership and really in the Anglo leagues around club owners and club structures and boards and stuff. But it seems that the French league is a little bit more fluid, and you have people coming in, coming out, and then that kind of changes the complexion of the leagues and the clubs. So it's interesting to watch from afar, but at the end of the day, they have some resources to pull on some of the best talent in the world, which makes it a really exciting league to watch as well, which would be pretty fun to potentially compete in someday.
Very nice. And you've got the South African teams in the Pro 14. What's that been like?
It's been interesting. So we haven't played one yet.
Yeah. Okay.
We haven't played a fixture against South African team yet. We will play one in middle of February, and then obviously we'll go down there for basically a mini tour in April. So we'll play Cheetahs, and then we'll go and play the Kings. And I think it was strange kind of in the build up to the season because we really didn't have the fixture list until a couple weeks out. Because all the stuff was being finalized with the South African teams, how many were coming in, were they coming in, and so, but I think it's added a little bit of interest in something a little bit different. Up to this point, really, we've kind of just done our jobs, and it hasn't been too dramatically different. Although it will be interesting once we head down to South Africa and then have the Cheetahs in town.
Nice. It'll be again a whole thing just sort of shaking things up a little bit. And we're as we you do that, and then we bounce back to the national team. I know Michael has a couple of questions before we get there. Gary Gold, new coach for the U.S. national team. Have you talked to him much? Have you? What do you think about the transition to a new coach?
Yeah, I'm was fortunate enough to be able to speak with Gary and
Good.
spend some time with him in November, which was great. Really excited to work with him and look forward to being a part of the program moving forward. And I think obviously the timing of everything has its challenges, but that being said, there's a lot of opportunities for growth, and we're qualified for a World Cup, so I think it's just about all of us as a team and as a program just buying into the next 18 months and just get as prepared as we can for when that rolls around and just have everyone hit the ground running. So there's a little bit of a challenge in that way that we just have to connect that much quicker, but I think it's something we're all looking forward to and can't wait to get stuck into in this upcoming ARC.
Nice. Michael, you got one?
Yeah, we got some rapid fire questions here. First off, though, talk about Cheetahs in their academy. Another ARC squad member is Ruben De Haas. Blaine, what do you think being in that academy has done for his development in a game and being able to make that roster?
Yeah, well, I think South African Nines are some of the best in the world. They seem to have a really diverse skill set, just really good rugby players all around. So I imagine the coaching and the competition level he's received has been pretty high, and he's obviously been immersed in that environment. So I'd probably say it's been pretty beneficial.
Okay, so can you ever see yourself playing in the MLR or some other domestic league in the U.S.?
Yeah, obviously it's the dream, I think, to be able to play professional rugby at home for a living. It would be awesome. So, really looking forward to seeing that competition kick off and wishing them all the best of success.
So if your next step outside of Pro 14, if there is a next step, and it's not the MLR, which league would you like to play in? Like, if you could choose.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to ask my wife.
That's a smart answer. What do you think she would say? Do you want to go to Australia?
We'll see how your body's doing. Yeah, yeah, we'll see how your body's doing. No, but yeah, I mean, Super Rugby would be amazing, but I'll probably be a little bit older then. France would be extraordinary as well, and the cultural kind of experience. And Japan is a really interesting league, and I think they're doing very, very cool things as a country in the sport. And I think it would really be interesting to see how rugby kicks off in Japan after this World Cup and with the Olympics, and it could be a really interesting place to play.
All right, and look ahead to college rugby, because you did have your impact in college rugby. And Cal is coming up this weekend. They're playing in the Storer Classic, the tournament at UCLA. Blaine, I'm going to guess I think I can guess what your pick is to who's going to win that tournament.
Yeah, I have to go with my Bears.
Okay, so your Bears win that. Who do you think is going to be in the final with them?
Whew, that's a tough call, but I'd
a,
probably say UCLA.
probably UCLA. Okay, so it's an all Blaine Scully final. What about like national championship? Now that we have a D1A where we've got St. Mary's and Life and BYU and Cal, along with a variety of other strong programs all coming together, and Navy and I'm blanking on it. Lindenwood,
Penn State.
Penn State. Thank you, Indiana. Any thoughts? National champion.
I mean, it's pretty cool to see the parity in collegiate competition now. It's been really kind of fun to be able to watch as much as I can over here and be able to somehow jerry rig my TV to get the Pac-12 network and watch Cal play St. Mary's and a couple of classics and obviously, really attached to that program and really thankful for what they've done for me and how they supported me not only as a young man coming to the university, but since I graduated, how good they've been to me and how much they've continued to look after and support me. So I'll always watch with a fond heart and see how Cal does. But it would be really interesting to kind of see how things shake out this year. It could be a very competitive Final Four, so any of those teams probably can beat each other on the day. So I think it'll probably have to be one of those wait and see how each team kind of develops and how they come into the postseason, who's healthy, who's carrying injuries, and kind of the form that they're rolling in with. But it could be a couple of different teams looking to lift the trophy at the end of the day.
4 tough playoff games, one after another. FloRugby, you can see Life University games. Looking for some more stuff on the horizon as well. What about on the high school? We're showing the high school national championships again this year. Jesuit eked out a last minute, an amazing last minute championship this last spring because half the team was sick, including their best player, Garrett Kay, and they still managed to win it. Do you keep up, even though you didn't play rugby at Jesuit, you're still a Jesuit Marauder, do you keep up with that? Do you keep an eye on what's going on and talk with some of your former classmates about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And still in regular contact with Lou Stanfield, who's now a coach there. So I know they've just kind of kicked off the start of their season, so they're all ready to go. And I know they'll do everything they can to hopefully have another good year.
All right. Very good. We got anything more for Blaine? Any final questions there, Michael?
Blaine, I was informed by Alex that you played water polo and somehow that transferred to rugby. How did that happen?
Well, I mean, it's funny. So I did water polo, basketball, and swimming, and then I had probably a couple opportunities to play water polo in college, but I ended up deciding not to. And my dad and brother played college football, but Mom did a pretty good job of keeping me away from that. And then my uncles were baseball players, and so I was probably just kind of a typical American sport mutt. And like I said, I went to college at UCLA with a buddy who I went to high school with, who was Pierce Cooley. He was a scrum half there and a scrum half at UCLA. He's a very good rugby player, actually. And he said, you need to come out and play. And so I did. And I was, I guess, like everyone else, once they touched the ball, was gone for good. So
gone for good.
Was gone for good.
That's pretty cool. Actually, you didn't know this, but I actually played water polo in school, and one of the very few trophies I have is a silver medal from the London Schools Championship. I was like a bit player. I mean, I couldn't stay afloat more than 2.5 minutes before I had to take a rest. But I did play it, and it's a tough sport. It is a physically very demanding sport, very tiring sport as well.
Absolutely.
But I think it translates pretty well to rugby in a lot of ways, and obviously, Blaine Scully's brain sort of translates pretty well to rugby too, don't you think?
Yeah. I got one more question for you, Blaine. So if there was one piece of advice you could give yourself in the past, something that you've been through now or have experienced, what would that be?
Whew, that's a tough one. Now, I guess what I'd say is probably something that I've kind of always tried to live by, and I think it's been pretty helpful in my career so far, but just being super curious on every sort of level, specifically as it relates to my rugby, but just wanting to know how to get better, who's doing what, how is my opposition competing, and always searching out ways to improve just by wanting to know. And then obviously the carry on is that is just trying to be really honest with where I'm at and where I need to improve and where I get better. And part of that's just kind of that constant self-analysis, and that almost can train yourself to give yourself feedback. And I'd say that has been a really important tool that I've been taught throughout my athletic career, is the ability to assess your own performance and then understand where you can potentially make improvements, and then have that inform your conversation you're able to have with your coaches and all that stuff. But really from that perspective, you actually own your development process, which is something that's been really important to me. And I think a reason why I've had a reasonable level of success is because I was given the tools to understand that everything starts with myself, and then it's no one else's responsibility to make me better other than me. You know what I mean?
Right,
so
for sure.
that I guess that's kind of the advice I would continue to instill on any young athlete, especially if I was telling myself, is you own everything you do, so.
I llove that. I love that entire attitude. You take control, take responsibility for your own development. Reasonable level of success. I sort of laughed at that because you're one of the most respected players in the Pro 14. So it's like, reasonable, I guess. But the whole thing about being curious, stretching your mind past the game, especially if you're a professional, and don't just go to training, go sit back on the couch and watch TV, just do more. I think Blaine players like you have, and you look at some of the successful professionals have broadened their minds and thought about more than just the game, and they made it more interesting that way. And I would imagine domestic life is better too if you're not talking about rugby all the time. Speaking as someone who talks about rugby all the time at home, just a quick look ahead on FloRugby. Keep an eye out. We've got Life University. They're going to be hosting LSU in about a week and a half. That's going to be a big game. Very exciting to see that because it's a Red River Life University crossover. We also have a Red River game with Texas Tech at Baylor. I'm going to be at that one up in Waco. And Texas Tech crushed Oklahoma. Big score on Oklahoma, and then lost to Arkansas by 4 points. Looking really good this year, and Baylor's 2-0 in league, so that's going to be a game to keep an eye out. And we have some other big news coming up very, very soon. Michael, I think it's very soon. I'm not sure we can let the cat out of the bag yet, but we have some other stuff coming up for subscribers as well, don't we?
Yeah, we can't, not yet, but very soon. Stay tuned. All
right. Keep an eye out for that. Thank you for watching. Blaine Scully, thank you very much for spending the time talking to your fans here on FloRugby.
Thanks for having me, everyone.
All right. Beautiful. That'll do it for us. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Blaine. Miss Pass. We'll see you next week.